They say the worst kind of betrayal doesn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It comes with a smile. My name's Martin Wells, and for years, I convinced myself that my son's wife, Danielle, simply needed time to warm up to me. I mistook politeness for peace, silence for respect. But deep down, I always knew she couldn't stand that my son still honored me. She wanted a man who'd forget where he came from, and I was a reminder she could never erase. So, I kept the peace, bit my tongue, smiled through the cold dinners, and clipped comments. Until one night, she looked me dead in the eye across her table and called me Roger, her father's name, the man who walked out on her before she could walk herself. I smiled back, but the glass in my hand shattered beneath the table. And in that quiet moment, bleeding through my palm, I realized I was done playing small. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. I've never been the kind of man to demand praise or affection. Raised in a house where emotions were rationed like wartime sugar, I learned early on that love wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, and earned over time. That's how I lived my life, how I raised my son. My name's Martin Wells. I'm 62, a retired electrician, and for the last 30 years, I've been a widower. My wife, Lillian, passed when our son, James, was just 8 years old. Cancer took her quick, like a thief in the night. One day she had a cough, and 6 months later I was explaining death to a boy who still slept with a nightlight. After she died, it was just me and James. I was no saint, but I showed up every damn day. Packed his lunches, braided his science project volcano with too much baking soda, sat through every awkward school recital. I worked overtime when I had to, skipped dating altogether, and tried my best to fill both parental roles without losing my mind. James turned out decent, kind-hearted, driven, maybe a little too eager to please, but decent. He became the sort of man his mother would have been proud of. I know I was. So when he met Danielle, I was cautiously hopeful. She was striking, dark eyes that rarely blinked and a voice that always seemed measured, like every word had passed through a filter before reaching her lips. The first time I met her, she shook my hand like a politician and called me Mr. Wells, even though I asked her to just call me Martin. I chalked it up to nerves. Some folks just take time to thaw, right? But over the years, that frost never melted. Don't get me wrong, Danielle never outright disrespected me. She never rolled her eyes or raised her voice. That would have been easier, honestly. Her game was silence, precision, the art of exclusion. I noticed it at dinners, where she'd steer the conversation away when James tried to bring up childhood memories. I saw it in the way she positioned herself between James and me, physically and emotionally. If I complimented him, she'd follow with a subtle correction. If he thanked me for something, she'd chuckle and say, "You're such a softie," like gratitude was a weakness. Still, I kept the peace. That was my mistake. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I was reading too much into things, projecting my loneliness onto her indifference. But it was hard to ignore the shift. James started canceling our regular breakfasts. When we did meet, he was glued to his phone or glancing at the time like he had somewhere better to be. They had their first child, my granddaughter, Lily, and suddenly I was just a name on a list of people to notify. I wasn't Grandpa. I was Martin. Can you hold her for a minute? While Danielle fixed her makeup or took a phone call. There was one moment that stands out more than any other. Lily was about 2, just starting to form real words. James was holding her in the kitchen during a birthday party they'd hosted, more her friends than his, and I walked in just as Lily called him Daddy. His eyes lit up. Danielle was across the room, watching, and when James turned to me and said, "You hear that, Dad?" She said Daddy. Danielle cut in with a tight-lipped smile and said, "Let's not make everything about fathers today." Just like that, a pin popped in a balloon, and the air got sucked right out of the room. I didn't say anything then. I smiled, nodded, went back to nibbling the same damn deviled egg I'd been holding for 20 minutes. Carl, my neighbor, had a theory about her. "She resents you," he said one night over beers on my porch. "Not 'cause you did anything wrong, but 'cause you did it right. You stuck around. Her dad didn't. I'd heard Danielle's story. Her father took off when she was still in the hospital nursery. Her mother raised her alone, and from what I gathered, bitterness was baked into the family recipe. Carl said, "Some people don't know how to be around what they never had." You make her feel small, Marty, just by existing. Maybe he was right, but that didn't make it easier to swallow. I never wanted to be a threat. I just wanted to be part of my son's life. The real fracture, the one I'd kept pressing down like a bruise I didn't want to look at, began around Father's Day last year. James called me the night before and said they were doing something low-key, just the three of them. "Danielle's been feeling overwhelmed," he said. "She just wants to stay in." I said I understood. I always understood. Then, that Sunday, Carl showed me a photo on Facebook. The three of them, James, Danielle, Lily, smiling at some overpriced brunch spot. Mimosas, avocado toast, the whole 9 yards. I wasn't even tagged. James hadn't posted it. Danielle had. I stared at that photo for a long time. Tried to tell myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe it was a last-minute plan. Maybe she posted it without thinking. But deep down, I knew. I was being carved out, quietly and deliberately, like fat from a steak. Trimmed away so their plate looked neater. That's when something started to harden in me. Not anger, exactly. More like resolve. I wouldn't beg to be included. I wouldn't plead for scraps of affection from the boy I raised. I'd keep my dignity. But it hurt. God, it hurt. And then came the dinner, the one where everything changed. But that's a story for another chapter. For now, all I can say is this. When a woman looks you in the eye and smiles like she's got nothing but politeness for you, but calls you by the name of the man who abandoned her, that's not an accident. That's a message. And after all these years of biting my tongue, swallowing my pride, and playing nice for the sake of my son, I finally heard it loud and clear. It's strange how the quiet things are what finally eat you alive. Not the shouting, not the slammed doors. Those are obvious. You can brace for them. But the silence? The slow turning away? That's what tears you apart from the inside out. After that Father's Day photo, something shifted in me. I didn't say anything to James. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to ask why I wasn't good enough to join them for brunch when I'd been the only parent in his life for over 20 years. But every time I rehearsed the words in my head, I heard my own father's voice. Don't whine. Don't make it about you. Be a man. So I stayed quiet. Just like always. But I started paying closer attention. When James would finally call, every 2 or 3 weeks now, I'd listen more to what he didn't say than what he did. I noticed how he never put Lily on the phone anymore. How he'd only called during his commute or on his lunch break, never when he was home. And if I asked if I could stop by, there was always some vague excuse. "Oh, Danielle's working on a deadline," or "We're doing some reorganizing this weekend," or the classic, "It's just not a good time." When you raise someone, feed them, shelter them, hold their fevered head over a toilet when they're sick, you think they'll remember that. You think that bond will be fireproof. But all it takes is one person with a lighter and a little patience to turn it into ash. Danielle never lit any matches outright. No, she was smarter than that. She just made sure there was always smoke. One Sunday, I showed up unannounced. That wasn't like me, but I was driving by their side of town and thought I'd take a chance. I had a bag of peaches from the farmer's market. Lily loved peaches. I figured I'd drop them off, maybe get 5 minutes of her giggles, a hug. Nothing dramatic. When I rang the doorbell, it took a long time before someone answered. Danielle opened it. She didn't even fake a smile this time. "Oh," she said, eyes narrowing just a touch. "I thought James told you we were busy today." "No, he didn't mention anything," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Just passing through. Thought I'd bring some peaches for Lily." She looked at the bag like it was a bomb. "Well," she said, hesitating, "she's napping. And we've got things going on." I caught a glimpse of James in the living room, kneeling by a toy bin. He looked up, saw me, and froze. He didn't get up, didn't wave, just stayed there, like a guest in his own home. I handed Danielle the bag anyway. "Tell her Grandpa brought these." She took it with a tight nod. "Thanks." And that was it. Door closed. Silence again. When I got home, I sat in the car for a long time before going inside. Carl came over later, saw me still in my driveway, and whistled through his teeth. "They're icing you out, aren't they?" I didn't answer. Didn't have to. "Damn shame," he muttered. You built your whole life around that boy. That was the truth of it. I had. Not in some controlling, possessive way. I gave James room to grow, make mistakes, become his own man. But I never once made him feel like he was an obligation. I wanted him. I chose him, every day, even when life chewed me up. And now? I felt like a piece of inconvenient history they didn't know how to store. The next week, I tried again. I texted James and asked if I could swing by and take Lily to the park for an hour. He replied an hour later. Danielle doesn't think she's ready for outings without us yet. Maybe in a few months. Lily was 3. A few months felt like code for never. I started to wonder if James even saw what was happening. If he realized how far he'd drifted from the man he used to be. The one who once told me, "You're the only reason I made it through Mom's death." Now, he barely acknowledged my role in his life. I thought maybe I was being paranoid. So I asked my sister, Elaine, to meet me for lunch. She and Danielle had never been close, but Elaine was the type to see through people quick. "Let me ask you something." I said over meatloaf and mashed potatoes at a diner we used to take James to. "Do you think Danielle likes me?" Elaine didn't even blink. "She tolerates you. Barely. Always has." That hit me harder than I expected. "She thinks I'm in the way. She thinks you're the past," Elaine said. "And she wants James focused on the future. Her future, not yours." That night, I sat in my living room staring at a picture on the wall. Me and James when he was 5, riding a roller coaster, both of us screaming like fools. I remembered how hard he'd cried after, not from fear, but because he didn't want the ride to be over. He clung to me, begged me to do it again. And now, I couldn't even get him to look me in the eye when I stood on his front porch. I started asking myself hard questions. Why did I keep chasing crumbs of affection from people who couldn't even be bothered to set a place at the table for me? Why was I making myself smaller, more polite, more accommodating, in the hopes that someone might remember to love me back? Wasn't I worth more than that? The truth burned like a low fire in my chest. I'd been shrinking myself for years, for their comfort. Playing the quiet father-in-law, the unproblematic grandpa, the patient man. But inside, I was boiling, and the pot was about to spill over. Danielle invited me to dinner. That alone should have set off alarms. She never invited me to anything directly. James was usually the messenger, and even then, it was always under the pretense of obligation. "Danielle said we should have you over sometime. Or, we might be doing a thing next month." Vague, half-hearted gestures meant to check the box. So when she texted me herself, "Hey Martin, we'd love to have you for dinner Friday. Just us. Want to talk about some family things." I stared at the message like it was written in a foreign language. I should have said no. My gut twisted the moment I read it. But curiosity won. Or maybe it was hope. Some stubborn part of me still believed there was a version of this family that included me, where I was more than a tolerated relic from James's old life. So I said yes. The day of, I bought a bottle of red wine and a bouquet of sunflowers, Danielle's favorite, or at least that's what James told me back when they were dating. I showed up in a button-down shirt I hadn't worn since Lily's christening. I even shaved, looked in the mirror and told myself, just listen. Stay calm. Don't go in looking for a fight. They greeted me at the door like politicians, smiling but stiff. Lily wasn't there. "She's having a sleepover at a friend's," Danielle said. "We thought it'd be better for the conversation." Her tone was smooth, clipped, like she was hosting a corporate dinner. We sat down a pasta, salad, some garlic bread that James had probably overtoasted. It was quiet at first. Too quiet. Danielle asked about my knee. I'd had surgery the year before. James asked how Carl was doing. All small talk, all deflection. Finally, halfway through the meal, Danielle set down her fork, folded her hands like a therapist, and said, "Martin, we've been talking, and we feel it's time to set some healthier boundaries." There it was. I nodded slowly. "Okay." She smiled, relieved that I hadn't reacted. "It's just, sometimes, your involvement feels a little overwhelming. James has his own family now, and while we appreciate everything you've done, truly, we want to make sure everyone's space is respected." I took a sip of water. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means we'd like a bit more structure. Scheduled visits. Less surprise drop-ins. And maybe, fewer conversations that revolve around the past. We're trying to be forward-focused." I turned to James. You feel this way too. He didn't look at me. It's not about feelings, Dad. It's just what's best for everyone. There was that word again, everyone. I wasn't part of that everyone, was I? I nodded again. My hand was under the table, holding my wine glass. Not lifting it, just holding it. I could feel the ridges of the stem digging into my palm. I thought about how many meals I'd eaten alone since Lily was born. How many birthdays passed with a quick text instead of a visit. How many memories they'd made without me in the frame. Danielle picked up her wine and smiled again. That same rehearsed curve of her lips. We hope you understand, Roger. It took me a second. Roger. I blinked. Roger. The room went silent in my head. My heart thudded once, twice, then dropped like a stone. She called me Roger. Her father's name. The man who vanished before she took her first steps. The man she claimed never mattered to her. And she looked right at me when she said it. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Because something inside me cracked so sharply, so cleanly, it almost felt like relief. I didn't say a word. Just smiled, kept chewing my bite of garlic bread, and squeezed the stem of the glass under the table until it exploded in my hand. It didn't make a sound up top. The tablecloth caught the shards, and my fingers only bled a little. But that pain, God, it was clarifying. Danielle didn't even notice. James kept talking about something, preschool schedules, or who knew what. I just stared at the table, the blood mixing with crumbs and butter. And I thought, this is it. This is the moment you stop trying. After dinner, I excused myself early. Said I wasn't feeling great. James walked me to the door, finally looking a little guilty. Hey, we're not trying to hurt you, okay? I nodded. Of course not. He hesitated. You okay? I looked him in the eye, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy I raised, conflicted, confused, reaching for something he couldn't name. I will be, I said. Eventually. When I got home, I cleaned the cut, wrapped it in gauze, and poured myself a real drink. No water. No restraint. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt finished. That night, after the dinner, I didn't sleep. Not out of anger, but clarity. There's a kind of peace that comes when you finally decide you're done begging to be loved the way you deserve. It wasn't rage that kept me up, it was freedom. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one James used to do his homework on, and wrote the letter in one go. No edits. No second drafts. Just the truth, the whole bitter and beautiful truth, pouring out of me like water from a cracked pipe. James, I raised you to be a man who speaks with both his heart and his spine. I don't know where either of those have gone. I want you to understand something, and I want it in writing, so there's no mistaking my words or twisting my tone. I know Danielle doesn't like me. That's her right. But what's not her right, and certainly not yours, is to treat me like a burden you're too polite to discard. I watched you disappear, James. Slowly, in pieces. It started with missed calls. Then birthdays turned into text messages. Then you needed boundaries, but only with me. Not with her friends. Not with her mother. Just me. I sat through dinners where I was clearly unwelcome. I watched your wife twist your love for me into something embarrassing. Something she needed to manage. And I stayed silent. For you. For your peace. For your daughter. But last night, she called me Roger. I don't care if it was intentional or not. What matters is you let it hang there. No apology. No correction. Just silence. Just more of that cowardly quiet you've chosen to wrap yourself in since you married her. So I'm done. This isn't punishment. It's clarity. You have a family now. Protect it. Nurture it. But don't expect me to be the forgotten third wheel you drag out for holidays and photo ops. I won't beg to be included. I won't shrink myself so Danielle can feel bigger in your life. If you want to talk, man to man, you know where to find me. But this door only swings one way now. Dad. I folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and drove it over to his house at 6 a.m. Left it in the mailbox. No knock. No doorbell. Just walked back to my truck, started the engine, and let the sunrise hit my face like a slap. Then I waited. 1 day, 2, 3, nothing. Not a call, not a knock, not even a text saying he'd gotten it. That silence used to destroy me. Now, it told me everything I needed to know. I started living again. I went back to the trade school and offered to volunteer twice a week. taught a few kids how to rewire a fuse box, showed them how to hold a screwdriver without stripping the head. They reminded me of James at that age, wide-eyed, eager, still believing they could fix things if they just tried hard enough. Carl helped me repaint the porch. Elaine came by with lasagna and unsolicited advice. "They'll come around," she said. I smiled. Not bitter, just detached. A week after I dropped the letter off, I got a voicemail. "Danielle." Of course it was. "Martin," she began, her voice thick with passive-aggressive concern. "We got your letter. I'm sorry if anything was misinterpreted. I know emotions run high sometimes, and I understand you felt excluded. But James is really struggling with all this. He doesn't know how to handle your tone. It's making things harder. We thought you wanted to be part of Lily's life." She paused, sighed. "We're just trying to build something stable. That requires emotional maturity from everyone involved. I hope, with time, you'll be ready to rejoin the family. On healthier terms." She hung up without waiting for a response. I didn't call back. I didn't save the voicemail. I didn't even show it to Carl or Elaine. Because here's the thing. When someone calls your boundaries a tone problem, what they're really saying is, you don't get to be upset about how we treat you. But I did. I do. And for once, I wasn't going to explain or defend myself. I wasn't going to fold the letter of my life to fit in their envelope anymore. I sent Lily a birthday card that week. A hand-drawn cartoon of a peach, her favorite fruit, with a little note inside. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I love you always. Grandpa." No return address. Let them wonder. It started with whispers. You'd think something so private, so deeply personal, would stay behind closed doors. But nothing stays secret in small towns, especially when you've lived in the same place for 40 years. People talk. Neighbors talk. Church friends who suddenly pause mid-conversation talk. At first, it was subtle. At the hardware store, Vince, the cashier who's known me since I fixed his mother's ceiling fan in '98, gave me a too long look before saying, "Everything all right, Marty?" "Just fine," I said. Then it got louder. Elaine called me one morning, her voice sharp. "Have you seen the Facebook post?" "What post?" She huffed. "Danielle. Some long-winded thing about setting boundaries with toxic family, and how not everyone is meant to be in your child's life just because they share DNA. She didn't use your name, but come on. Everyone knows who it's about." I logged in, scrolled, found it. There it was, one of those faux spiritual, cotton candy posts with pastel backgrounds and white text, followed by a caption just vague enough to give her deniability. Sometimes you have to choose peace over legacy. Protect your children, even if it means disappointing those who raised you. Love is earned, not entitled. #gentle parenting, #breaking cycles. The comments were what did me in. "She's so strong. Proud of you for standing up to older generations. Some people just don't get it. Their time is over." I shut the laptop. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed what I already knew. Danielle wasn't just excluding me. She was rewriting me. And James was letting her. I didn't respond publicly. That wasn't my style. I didn't post a rebuttal or text her a warning. I didn't even bring it up when I ran into Mrs. Halpern at the post office, and she gave me a look like I'd kicked a puppy. Because here's the thing. When someone controls the narrative, silence looks like guilt. But I wasn't guilty. Not anymore. The next call came 3 days later. A number I didn't recognize. I answered anyway. "Martin," Danielle's voice. Again. Calm, polished. A voice trained to navigate hard conversations without ever admitting fault. "I just want to say," she began, skipping right past hello, "that I didn't intend for things to escalate like this." I didn't say a word. She filled the silence like she always did. "You've clearly made your decision, and I respect that. But I need you to understand how your actions are affecting James. He's really hurt, Martin. He's trying so hard to balance everything. And now he feels like he's being forced to choose between his wife and his father." I let out a slow breath. That choice was made a long time ago. "That's not fair," she snapped. Her mask cracked just a hair. "You don't see what goes on behind the scenes. James defends you more than you know. If he has to defend me," I said, "then clearly you've already put me on trial." Silence. Then, softly, "I didn't mean to call you Roger. That's not what you said the first time." Another pause. Then the dagger. "We're just trying to raise Lily in a healthy environment. One without guilt, pressure, or outdated family dynamics. There it was again. That word, outdated. I almost laughed. You want healthy? I asked. Then teach her how to apologize. Teach her what love looks like when it's shown up, not just spoken. Because what you're modeling isn't peace. It's erasure. She hung up. Just like that. No goodbye. No closure. And I sat there, phone in hand, blood simmering but heart steady. Because for once, I didn't second-guess what I'd said. I didn't worry about how it sounded. I didn't regret it. I stood by it. Later that week, Carl and I grabbed lunch at a food truck that had just opened downtown. As we ate on a park bench, he nudged my shoulder. You okay with all this mess? I took a bite of my sandwich. Swallowed. Nodded. I am. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. Even if James never comes around. I met his eyes. I hope he does. But I'm not twisting myself into something smaller just to fit into the life his wife decided was more convenient without me. Carl smiled, slow and proud. Took you long enough. I chuckled. Yeah, but I'm here now. There's a strange kind of stillness that settles over you when you stop waiting. Waiting for the apology that'll never come. Waiting for the phone call that makes everything make sense. Waiting for someone you raised to remember what it felt like to be held in your arms, small and afraid, and know you never dropped them. I stopped waiting. Not out of bitterness, but necessity. You spend enough time being cast as the villain in someone else's story, and eventually you have to ask, what story am I writing for myself? The first sign that I'd let go wasn't some big emotional breakthrough. It was quiet. I was at the grocery store, reaching for a jar of marinara when I spotted Lily's favorite yogurt in the dairy section. Normally, I'd buy it, even if I wasn't invited over, even if it would sit in my fridge until it expired, just to feel close to her. But this time, I didn't. I looked at the strawberry label, the cartoon cow on the front, and walked away. That night, I didn't drink to drown the ache. I poured a glass of wine to toast the silence. Because it meant something. It meant I was no longer trying to parent a grown man who didn't want to be a son anymore. I was no longer knocking on a locked door, hoping someone inside would remember I helped build the damn house. Carl noticed the change first. You're lighter, he said one afternoon as we installed a ceiling fan in a neighbor's garage. I let go of a rope I didn't realize I'd been tugging for years, I said. Felt like a war. But the only person holding the other end was me. He grinned. That'll preach. Word around town never fully died down. Some people avoided the topic. Others leaned in with quiet curiosity. You talked to James lately? Mrs. Halpern asked at church one Sunday. Nope, I said simply. But I think about him. That's enough. That's the thing no one tells you about boundaries. They're not walls to keep people out. They're fences to keep your soul from leaking out every time someone pushes you too far. They're love letters to your own sanity. I wrote mine with every unreturned call, every ignored voicemail, every time Danielle smirked while my son looked away. But I also wrote it in smaller, softer ways. In the birthday cards I kept sending Lily. No return address. No pressure. Just one every year. Always with a hand-drawn peach and a note. Grandpa loves you. That's never changed. In the Sunday morning trade school sessions where I taught young men how to fix things, wires, water heaters, sometimes themselves. In the way I stopped introducing myself as James's dad and started saying, Martin, just Martin. People came and went. Time moved on. But I stayed rooted, solid, no longer bending toward a sun that refused to shine on me. Then, one afternoon in spring, something unexpected happened. I got a letter. No return address. Just a small, carefully folded card with a child's handwriting on the front, to Grandpa. Inside, in blocky, misspelled letters. Thank you for the peach drawing. I miss you. Mommy doesn't let me call. Love, Lily. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at those words until they blurred. My hands trembled, not with sadness, but with something deeper. Proof. I wasn't forgotten. Danielle might have rewritten the narrative, but children remember love when it's given. They remember who shows up, even in silence, even through distance. I didn't respond. I didn't want to cause trouble, but I took that letter, framed it, and hung it in my hallway. Not for visitors. For me. To remind myself, I loved. I gave. I endured. And no one, not Danielle, not James, not a town full of whispers, can take that away from me. I wasn't perfect, but I was present. And I will never again make myself small to be tolerated by people I once carried. Have you ever realized that love, no matter how deep, isn't a license to be disrespected? If you've drawn a hard boundary with family, not out of anger, but self-preservation, share your story below. Let others know they're not alone in choosing peace over proximity. Your story might help someone find the strength to stop waiting for an apology that'll never come.